It's a real honor to be giving a keynote. My first big talk was actually at this conference 1 year ago in the vaults downstairs. So to go from 200 people to a few more than 200 people is a bit scary, but it's awesome. So community, we all talk about it. We all know that it's something that's important. We know that it's vital to the health of PHP. But do we all give it the support it needs? I think without us, without the people in this room, the community doesn't exist. So we're all responsible for making the community what it is and for giving back. Yes, life's busy. I've got 4 kids and a horse and dog and whatever else. Life is mental. But no matter how crazy your life is, I promise you, everyone in this room can make a difference. And the clicker's not working. Awesome. That's better. So, who am I? My name's Liam Wiltshire, kind of says there, and I'm the director of web development for these guys. Before I go on to this next slide, who did see my talk here last year or saw me at PHP Northwest? Show of hands? Shit. Anyone that did, feel free to use the next minute or so to tweet how I need to come up with some new material. That's absolutely fine. So I've worked with PHP for about 10 years. I'm still involved in a hands-on role, which is awesome, because as a director of development, it basically means I get to pick all the good projects. I actually first learned PHP, I don't know if anyone probably remembers these. There was a book called PHP for the World Wide Web. It was by Larry Ullman. It was a quick start book. I don't even know if they still publish those. Do they? I don't know. Anyway, if you ask me, the devs in my department are incredibly lucky. Because, I'm an awesome facilitator, fact. And I'm a great leader. If you spoke to those guys, however, they might say I'm more like this guy. Yeah. So anyway, obvious question here. Who feels here that they give back to the community? Yeah, I'd say a fair few. The fact that you're coming to a conference means you obviously care enough. You care about your development and you care about the community enough to be here. So, I am probably preaching to the converted. So I guess the more relevant question is, who feels they could give back more? That's pretty much every single hand here. Awesome. So just have a think yourself for a moment. Perhaps, why do you feel that you don't give them back as much as you could do? Or why do you feel you could contribute more? There can be a number of reasons, but I think, from my experience at least, it boils down to 2 main points. Being too busy. We touched upon this at the start. We probably all feel like this from time to time. I know that getting up and running on a new project takes time. It takes time to read through the documentation, understand the contribution guidelines, understand their coding standards if they're different to what you're used to. Perhaps you don't have time to, pull down the project, certainly if your internet's as terrible as mine. And just getting up to speed with the project to be in a situation to be able to contribute does take time, and perhaps, you've just got other things going on. Perhaps you've got a partner, perhaps you've got kids. God forbid, maybe you've even got a project, a hobby that doesn't involve computers. That'd be mental. But those things all add up. So, you might have the best intention. You might go, right, this year, this is the year. I am going to give back. I'm going to pull that project out of Git. I'm going to make some pull requests, and the world will be better. And it doesn't happen. Who's found this at one point or another in their career? Again, most people. This is the other common one. This was kind of what was talked about this morning. So you look at the people that are contributing to those projects. You look at who the project maintainers are. And you've got this little voice in the back of your head. And it's going, there's no way I'm good enough. There's no way I can contribute. There's nothing new I can add. And to be honest, I'm more worried that my submissions will be laughed out the door for being crap. You know what? I'm not going to ask you to put your hands up this time because that's completely unfair. But I'm sure there's a lot of people going, you know what? Yeah. I mean, I know I feel like that multiple times a week. So I'm sure I'm not the only one. I have got a secret to tell you. You might not realize it, but if you do have that voice in your head, if you tell yourself you're not good enough, you are lying to yourself. No matter if you've got 2 months experience, or if you've got 2 years experience, or your name is Erasmus, then you have something to contribute. Just the simple fact that you're here today, the fact that you've spent the last 2 days learning about PHP, expanding your knowledge, talking to other developers, and getting new ideas, exploring areas that you perhaps haven't got as much skill in, means that you have knowledge and ideas that people who aren't here don't have. You have something that you can take away and give back to those people. Think back to when you started out as a developer. Remember your first few days, and you're like, HTML entities without an underscore, HTML underscore entity underscore decode with underscores. Is it needle, haystack, needle, K-sort, A-sort, R-sort? What the? Guess what? Someone starting out today has those exact same feelings. They've got that going through their head. They've got this entire brain of mashup of all the weird and wonderful decisions that PHP has made through the years. You have that experience. You know what it's like to go through that. In that sense, that actually I would say someone who's been doing this for perhaps not so long has more to give back in that way than someone's been doing it for a while, because as developers, and specifically as PHP developers, we have this weird ability to take all that pain and anguish and kind of lock it somewhere deep, dark inside, and it doesn't come out very often. So, you do have something to give back. You are good enough. And besides, giving back doesn't have to be about contributing code. Both of these arguments kind of sprout from that we kind of somehow assume that in order to be given back to the community, you have to be writing code and contributing code. And this isn't the case, something that Youre touched upon yesterday. Yes, of course, giving back can be in the form of contributing code, and there are plenty of project maintainers in here that would love for you to be doing that, so if I didn't say that, I'd probably get beaten up afterwards. But it doesn't have to be. I mean, I've taken a look at the inner workings of ZF before, and after getting really, really confused and probably crying a little bit, I realized there's no way in hell I'm going to be contributing to that project anytime soon. I then looked at ZF2 and ZF3, and it felt even worse, but there we are. But there are plenty of other ways that you can be giving back, ways you can be making a difference without writing code. So, we've already said that we don't necessarily have all the time in the world to do this, so let's focus on that. We have manic lives, of course we do. But what if I said to you, could you find 15 minutes? I would imagine that most people probably could find 10 or 15 minutes. Maybe that's 15 minutes during lunch. Or if you're like me, you press snooze a couple less times. If you can find 15 minutes, what can you do with it? Who here has used Stack Overflow or any other Stack Exchange sites? Yeah, pretty much everyone. Yeah, most of us have used them. Probably at least once, probably many, many times. But have you also answered questions on there? Answering other developers' questions doesn't take long to do. It can be, certainly if it's something that you have knowledge of, it can be a really quick way of giving back. This is an example on here from the Magento Stack Exchange site. It was a really simple question. It was basically just, I've got the default theme and I want to remove this block. How do I go about doing it in the XML? It was an easy enough answer. But by answering it, not only has the original poster now got that answer, anyone else who isn't sure, who's perhaps new to Magento, and has loaded up the base theme and can't figure it out, can find that answer as well, and it kind of keeps on giving. And it took 2 minutes to answer, I guess. On Stack Exchange, there are somewhere between 600 to 700 questions asked each day, tagged with PHP. And there have been about 700 people at this conference. Go figure. If everyone in this room, everyone that came to this conference, just spent 10 minutes answering one question each, we could go through an entire day's worth of Stack Overflow questions, like that. Imagine how big a benefit that would have to our community. With so many questions, the great thing about it is that there are kind of questions that are massively complicated that I read and go, I don't even understand the question. There are also kind of people that are new to PHP that have quite simple questions, like the XML example before. So no matter what your experience level, there will be something that you can answer and a way that you can give back. And it's not just Stack Overflow. I've used Stack Overflow because we all use it, but a lot of projects have their own forums, communities, whether that's WordPress or Laravel or Magento or whatever else. So, haunt those places. People ask questions on those forums as well. If you have that knowledge, make sure you share it. The great thing about contributing to forums and to sites like Stack Overflow is the number of people you can reach really quickly. So this is an example of a question I answered 3 years ago, and it's been seen by almost 4,000 people. Now, let's be realistic, probably not everyone, A, found the answer they wanted, or B, even wanted that page. Someone probably used it as link bait, I don't know. But even if, let's say, half of those people, let's say 2,000 people, actually found the answer they were looking for, that's more people than I could possibly reach out to in hours of time, just by something that took maybe 5 minutes to do. That way of sharing our knowledge, of growing our collective knowledge, is really powerful, and is something that every single person here could do. Testing. Testing is just as valuable as contributing code. Yeah, it's not the most exciting part of a project, but it is equally vital in order for a project to keep moving forwards. Think about some of the big projects out there. Think about, again, WordPress or Magento or anything, a framework, ZF, whatever. Don't just think about the developers using it that are building tools with these things, but think about the websites that they're producing, the applications they're using, the people using those applications and visiting those websites. Just by perhaps spending 15 or 20 minutes testing a new patch, you could be helping more people than you're likely to meet in your entire life in a quarter of an hour. This was a screenshot from the WordPress build site. It's about 4 months ago, 5 months ago, something like that. At any one time, there could be, like it says here, over 200 patches waiting to be tested. Now, patch testing, particularly on WordPress, isn't difficult. I'm pretty sure there's a grunt tool that basically installs the patch for you and tells you exactly what you need to test, and you literally just have to work through the steps. It's really straightforward. But if no one does it, then those 219 patches, which might be new features, or there might be bug fixes or security fixes, to come back to a topic that's been kind of quite important today, if no one tests them, they will never reach production. They will never go gold. So the project won't go forward. It will just die. So at the moment, we've looked at ways to help kind of lots of people, but there is more to it than that. You could actually just give back by helping one fellow developer. This quote up here was made on Twitter, I think, by a really talented and incredibly good-looking developer. Yeah. Helping other developers can take on many, many forms. I've been lucky enough that the last few days I've actually been mentoring one of the diversity scholarship awardees. It's been, to be honest, I've probably learned more than they have. But just by being able to support someone and introduce them to community, hopefully they'll be able to come back in years to come. Hopefully, perhaps they'll then mentor the next group of people that come in. That's the sort of thing that it kind of proliferates quite quickly. Well, that's a long word for me. And by helping one person, they can help someone else who can help more people, and so on. Offering assistance, can be in person, it can be digital. I mean, there is a website, phpmentoring.org, that I know if you're looking to mentor someone or you're looking to be mentored, that's a great place to go. By building up developers in this way who perhaps are new to the community, are new to PHP, all you're doing is making our community stronger. Offering assistance kind of on a one-off, kind of ad hoc basis is equally valid. No matter what it is, if you're passing knowledge on that you have and someone else is yet to have, then you are increasing their knowledge base, and therefore you're increasing the knowledge base of the entire community. Because they can then pass that knowledge on to perhaps 2 more developers, who might pass it on to 4 more developers. Should really know my base too, shouldn't I? Whatever, point being that as we pass that knowledge on, it's just making what we know stronger and stronger. This was an example that happened to me last year. There was a developer who was at the conference last year who was having some problems with some database performance. And I mentioned that I'd done a talk here last year, and it was on kind of basic things you can do with MySQL performance. And, oh, howdy. And much to my own amazement, not only did A, someone come to my talk, B, they remembered it, and C, I somehow managed to trick them into thinking I knew what I was talking about. So he got in touch with me on Twitter, sent over some bits and pieces. To be honest, I don't actually think I did that much. I kind of looked at it and went, yeah, you got some big numbers there. I kind of pointed out a few things, but that was about it. And he definitely did the hard miles. But he did manage to massively increase his database performance. So hopefully some of those things that he did kind of pick up from doing that, he can now share with other developers who, perhaps are having similar issues. Documentation. You know what? It's not the most sexy part of contributing, but it is really, really important. Think about any open source project you're using. That might be a framework, it might be a CMS, might be PHP. PHP developers at PHP conference, go figure. Now, I would suggest that if you could turn around to me and go, you know what, I've never looked at a piece of documentation in my life, I'd go, you're lying. I know just on PHP itself, I probably look at the documentation at least 2 or 3 times a week, or a day. So I'm sure that most people here probably look at the documentation on a regular basis. Now, just think for a minute that none of that documentation exists. There was a README that just said, here's the code, good luck. Now, okay, some projects, this is pretty much the case. But you probably could figure out for yourself. You probably could figure out how to compile PHP. You probably could figure out kind of what order the arguments went in. But it'd probably take you an awful lot more time and probably result in an awful lot more swearing. So this is an example from the Symfony documentation GitHub repo. When I took the screenshot, I think there were 212 open issues. Some of those, yes, were quite complicated. Some of them are things that unless you really understand how Symfony works, you understand kind of how the underlying implementation works, whatever else, you're probably not going to be able to help with. But equally, there are plenty of them that are either typos, changing variable names where in a version the argument name's changed and they've not actually changed it in the documentation, those sorts of things that anyone could pick up and change. 5 minutes, pull request. In fact, you probably even want to check it out. You probably use the inline editing tool and create a pull request and do the same job. Those sorts of things, even without that in-depth knowledge, you could do. And by doing that, the next person who comes across the project isn't going to get confused because the variable name is different, isn't going to kind of get hung up on some insignificant detail about there being a typo because you fixed it. Yes, okay, bug fixing counts as writing code. So I've kind of lied a little bit, but it is valid and it is a valuable contribution. A lot of code contribution on projects often looks at adding new features because that is exciting. But what about the bugs that already exist in the code base? Yes, we all do our best. We all try and write perfect code, and we follow all the coding standards, and we write our unit tests, and we do everything we're supposed to do. But you know what? Bugs happen. So what can we do about it? I find that bugs tend to fall into 2 categories. They tend to either be annoyances, or they tend to be actual bugs. Really ought to come up with a better name for the second category. So if anyone's got one, then let me know on Twitter. But whatever you classify them as, there are often really small things that anyone can pick up with little prior experience on a project and help fix. So this is an example of an annoyance. This was actually, it's the joined-in Android app. And it's something that happened last year while I was here. I found that if you're on a particular talk, this was before the new UI. If you're on a particular talk and you press the back option in the top menu, it didn't actually do anything. You just stayed on the page, and the only way to do it was, because I had no softback key, so I had to close the app and reload it, which was really frustrating. So I spent the whole of Thursday bitching about it, and then kind of thought, you know what, I should probably stop whining and do something about it. I mean, I've never touched Android app development in my life, and I'd probably written about 200 lines of Java total. But I thought, how hard can it be? So I pulled the code down. I kind of found somewhere else where it worked, and I kind of went, oh, that's how they're doing it. Right, fine, let's look at the code that doesn't work. OK, fine. I then couldn't figure out how to get it to compile onto my phone. But I got that working eventually. And I did all this, kind of got it working, and I did it during lunch on the Friday. So yeah, that's not going to end the world. It's not going to start World War III. But by doing it, anyone else that was using the Android app that was finding that exact same frustration, I was solving it for those people as well, and people that moving forward are using it. That piece of code that I wrote is still in the Android app code base today. So people that are downloading it now are still benefiting from that fix. So bear in mind, it's something that I'd never done before. I was really proud of my contribution. So this is what it was. Yeah, one line. I, for my sins, do quite a lot of work with Magento. And there is a particular product importer called MagMe that we use quite a lot to kind of spin up test products and whatever else. In Magento, as with most similar platforms, you can create prefixes for your database tables. So you might have, MG underscore, whatever. And there was a bug in some of the MagMe importers that if you had a prefix, the actual table names in the importer were hard-coded, so it just threw errors and the whole thing fell over, and you end up with corrupted tables. It wasn't great. This had been causing us a hell of a lot of problems when we were spinning up new projects. So I kind of did some digging through the code base and found the issue, and I fixed it. Now, I could have just fixed that bug in the version that we had. I could have put it back into our local repo, called it a day, and gone off with whatever else I was doing. But what about the next person that comes across that bug? What about the next person who perhaps can't go through the code, and it corrupts their database tables, and they've got no idea what they're doing? So instead, I submitted a pull request back to the main Git repo. Took 5 minutes, I guess. And now no one else is going to have that same issue. Again, it was a tiny, tiny, tiny change. But those things, those small fixes that make everyone else's life better, are just as valuable as adding new features and writing buckets of new code. The other side of bug fixing is bug reporting. This is an awesome little demonstration of how to report a bug. If you do come across an issue in a package or a library you're using, don't just ignore it. Don't just find something else that fixes it. Don't just moan about it on Twitter, as in the keynote yesterday. File a bug report. Think about if you were trying to fix that bug. Think about the information you would need to be able to do a good job of fixing it. Provide as much detail as you can so that the dev fixing it doesn't have to spend an hour figuring out what the hell you were going on about. Tell them what the issue is, what it should have done, how you created it, and if you were able to reproduce it. Just basic, simple things that make the person who is going to do the bug fixing, which hopefully will be one of you guys, to make their lives easier. So in this talk, I aimed to show you that anyone could give back to the community in a very real way, but without requiring a huge time investment. And hopefully I've been able to do that. So just to kind of wrap up and to summarize, I wanted to leave you with a couple of thoughts. If we could all find 15 minutes a week, I'm not saying 15 minutes a day, I'm saying 15 minutes once a week. So that's an hour a month. Then in 1 year, the people in this room would have given back over 9,000 hours to our community. That's 379 days. That's more than a year of dev time, just from 15 minutes a week. Imagine what we could achieve with that time, and imagine how much better our community would be for it. Thank you.